Then finally, I'll say about the Michael Barber, after he left Tony Blair's office and actually went from education to the central to work with Tony Blair in the Prime Minister's office, and then later went to McKinsey and to do help analysis of worldwide educational reform. And they did a report in 2008, you might have seen it, but it is the characteristics of the top performing systems in the world. And so that's a 45-page report, quite informative. And they analyzed the top performers included certainly Finland, Singapore, Hong Kong, Canada as represented, let's say, by Ontario and Alberta, and so on. And now they've just completed a new study with slightly different countries, most of the same, but they've added others. For example, they've added Ontario, and they've dropped Finland, not because Finland's not performing, but because there's a difference of that it's not clear that the strategy is quite explicit. Anyway, this report is done. They're waiting to release it in December when the OECD PISA results come out, and this report will confirm what I'm saying. They will confirm the focus, the collective capacity building, the use of data, go light on judgment, high expectations, all of these things in a system sense. They're, as I said, a bit more difficult to do than some pieces of legislation, but they're way more effective, and they're not actually all that difficult to do. You have to understand the basis of it and make sure you've got these interconnecting. So we look forward to this report. We look forward actually to the continuing work internationally. The reason that Dalton McGuinty is hosting the session on building blocks for whole system reform is that we are interested in participating in an ongoing dialogue with other countries about how to do this work, not just because we've got the answers, but because we have the experience, and we're asking, we're interacting and wanting to find out and see, and we realize what each country differs in terms of its context. So I'm going to stop in 60 seconds, and just let me underscore this to say this is exciting because it's really working, and it's working on a very large scale. And you do have to stay the course. You have to have what we call relentless consistency. But it's not something that depends on the right or the left in governmental terms. It's something that really does build capacity. And in this partnership, both the central part has influence in shaping it, and then local part has a lot of empowerment, I want to say, because of the capacity building, the participation, the use of data.
You were describing the team at the top with the Premier, the Minister of Education, and you. It seems that, I mean, it's a strong... you're very strong at the national level, at the state level, rather. In Sweden, we have at least 2 levels dealing with school. Is that difficult for us, if we're going to implement a reform like yours, do you think?
When you say 2 levels, do you mean the...
At least, yeah, I mean the state national level and the municipal level.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think I don't know your case fully, and when I say this, what I've said clearly, I'm not saying you should do what I tell you. Obviously, you're not going to anyways, but you should think about these things, and we want to share and learn from it. So I think at your level, at the central level, there's probably there is more coalition of government, so it's not as single government focused. So I see that's one variable at the center, but the other we have districts, and you have municipalities. And we said the same thing in Finland last week, and they agree, is that there needs to be a greater capacity at the municipality level to help all the schools within the municipality to develop. That's one of 2 things. And secondly, there needs to be a greater sense of partnership between municipalities and the center. Right?
How important was it? You have been building a big database, I think, on the state level. How important has that been for transparency and also for getting forward?
I think it's absolutely critical, and all the research tells us this, that we call it transparency rules, as the phrase we use, but it's transparency results and transparency of practice, as I said before. You can't do what I described if you do not have ongoing openness of results. So here's the tricky part. And we did it this way. I wouldn't in the first year, nor did we, say, okay, now we're going to have results and we flood, give all this information out. We said we're going to have to build 2 things first, trust and capacity. So we spent 3 years building this capacity, and by building the capacity, there began much more trust from the teachers and the principals, saying, yeah, this seems to be, they really are serious about investing, they really are serious about following through. So it was after we built the trust that we began to increase the challenge, let me use that language, by saying, well, we really have to look at the results, because the results, we don't want the results, we don't think of the results as forming primarily an accountability function, even though it does. We think of it as informing capacity building focus. So if you have, let's say, 500 schools and 100 of them are doing well, and these are all similar schools, we call it statistical neighbors. These are similar schools, and some are doing well and some are not doing well. You should want to know laterally what's happening in order to come from it. So that this is also how the politicians have to learn to use data not for judgmental accountability, but primarily as a strategy for improvement. And if they do that, they will get their accountability anyways as a byproduct.
Is this database also so fine-grained that you can see that you have statistics over which methods work better for enhancing results?
Yeah, in our capacity building, we actually, when we started, this is why we brought in Ben Levin to help us do this, the Ministry of Education did not have the capacity to lead this work. So we created new capacity. We called it the Literacy Numeracy Secretariat. It has about 110 people in it, and their job is to work in this case, literacy and numeracy, in cooperation with the schools to identify and spread the teaching practices that are getting the results. So if you go to their website, which you can, Literacy Numeracy Secretariat, Ontario Ministry, you'll see 200 video clips of practices that work. And some of you know John Hattie's work from Auckland, New Zealand. John Hattie just spent the last 10 years looking at 40 or so teaching practices and then saying which of these practices by way of measured results have the greatest impact on student engagement and student learning. So he's sorting out what he calls the must-haves. These are so good you better do them, compared to those that are, some of them he calls disasters because they waste money or they do more harm than good. So it's not a static list, but capacity building means zeroing in and finding out what works best and then spreading it. And you would expect this in any profession. You would expect doctors to keep looking for the best methods and that. So it's very much grounded in effectiveness.
Exactly. A cultural question. One core concept here is leadership.
Yeah.
Now, Sweden is a country known for its egalitarian norms.
Yeah.
Some would even say jante, perhaps. Do you think that our culture would be a problem for us to introduce this kind of reform?
I would only answer that question if I were heading to the airport. No.
All right.
Yeah, no, I will answer it. So
quick answer then, and you run.
No, I mean, there is a difference. I've not been, I used to come to Sweden quite a lot when we were doing the OECD school improvement work, so I knew quite a lot at that point. And there's no question that your commitment to democratic organizations and equality is stronger than ours, let's say, more built in. But also Canada has, compared to the United States, has also quite a commitment. And if you look at the OECD results, you see that the gap between high and low performers is less in your country and in ours. So, but I think this question, because we talked about it yesterday with the school principals from Stockholm, is a very good question. One of our recommendations for school principals and other leaders goes like this: it's okay to be assertive, right?
To insist.
To insist, to lead. It's okay to lead. You have to lead, otherwise. So I think it does say that there's a lot of inertia, and if you want to break through the inertia, you have to have more leadership. I'm going to say that leadership is a mixture of authority and democracy. So, and you saw the principal yesterday in the video clip, right, that we showed. That principal was making sure things happen, but he wasn't bossing people around. He wasn't authoritarian. So, I guess I would say, if you ask me for direct advice, is create these conditions of capacity building and take a chance on more assertive leadership. That's what I would say.
Now we have, as you know, we have elections in 2 weeks. What would be your advice to the politicians here?
Get elected. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they tend to say there are difference between them,
Yeah.
So.
I mean, this is it's hard to. My advice is, I think, clarity of focus. And so my advice is not to take, single factors. We see 4 or 5 or 6 things going together. So my advice is, don't take grading or testing as one thing and say we must do this, because it has to be part of a combination. So focus and then combine, not 10 things, but 3 or 4 things that form a cluster that are likely to get impact, and then be very clear in terms of communication to the media, to the public, to local participation. And then the other part is very important, is that that there's normally a lot of energy going into getting elected, naturally enough. The real work begins after election, because it's all about implementation. 90% of it is implementation. So I think, again, the advice is be clear to get elected in the first place and have a good platform that has 4 or 5 things, and then be very aware that after this, you're getting into really serious implementation. That's going to require even more energy during implementation than was the case in the lead-up.
Yeah, because there's an implementation dip you have been talking about. It gets harder before it gets better.
Yeah, it's people have to get good at the new stuff, and that takes a little bit of time. But we've also found in the timeline that you can actually bring about change in shorter periods of time than we thought. We used to say, oh, it's going to take 5 years. Now we say within 2 years you start to see results, and that you build on it. So it's quite encouraging that way.
Well, that's wonderful. What's your warning then? What should they absolutely refrain from doing?
Well, given my list, refrain from doing the things that don't work, right? Which is transparency before you've built trust, transparency before you have good data, looking for accountability solutions that where in reality it's building up the capacity. It's also, I think this is a big one for all countries, is figuring out what is the role of the principal, the school principal. What is, well, I've been fairly clear about what we think it's beginning to look like, but I think your questions are, because most leaders in, like I would say in Swedish schools, are probably more the managerial than the instructional leadership type. So the question is, what does this new role look like? We show it. Is it desirable for you, yes or no? And if it is desirable, how do you promote and develop it? So I think an investment in the development of the role of the principal, along with the aim to improve teacher capacity. And when I say teacher capacity, I mean the individual quality of teachers. Finland has done a good job on that. But I also mean the ability of teachers to work together. And Finland has not actually been strong on that, and they say that too. They have not been strong on teachers working together, led by teacher leaders and school leaders, for example.
So reforms should be done in the right order.
Yeah, sequence is important.
And leadership.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, thank you, Michael Fullan. A big hand for him.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.